Hello.
Hello.
Hi everyone. You are perfectly allowed to be a Java developer or Ruby developer, and I'm going to tell you why, so Craig's wrong. Sorry. Also, I normally, for most times I get on stage, I usually, or when I'm hosting the event that I usually do a little sort of community story about something. So whilst half cut in the pub, about 4 years ago, Craig mentioned Composer, and I had never heard of it. So you basically explained Composer to you. I bet you probably didn't realise that. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Jim. Let's just do a little bit about me. I run Birmingham's PHP user group. It's great, obviously I'm going to say that. I run a quarterly conference, mini conference called Fusion in Birmingham as well, which is a polyglot thing, which we get all sorts of cool stuff, and we have cool things like a mental health track in that at the moment. And we do a lot of DevOps, and we do a lot of InfoSec and things like that. And I work for Eastside Company. Here's our logo. We're a Shopify agency in Birmingham. And we do microservicing stuff, so day to day I do microservices in Laravel and Vue.js, and yeah, we do some really, really cool work there. So, that's me. This is quite a difficult, I found writing an intro to this talk quite difficult. This is going to be my story about what I've experienced in a very small time of being a web developer. And I didn't know where to start. And I think probably the best place to start is always just to give a little background of where we are and where we've got to. And when I say background, I mean in programming in general. So, like all good talks, in the beginning, from the dawn of time, the computer is not a noun. The computer is a verb to describe a person. It's an adjective, sorry, it's not a verb, it's an adjective. And the person is someone doing the computations. And that is usually quite laborious, it's boring, and it's mathematical. So, when researching this talk to give the background in programming, it probably didn't surprise me that much, but another talk actually confirmed this, that all of the pioneers in the world of programming to start off with are all women. And I've just put a few up. On the far left, some will probably recognise her because she's the only one that's a portrait and a painting and not actually a photograph. That's Ada Lovelace, who is known as the the godmother of programming. So from the 1950s, then we've got some really interesting pioneering figures. We've got Grace Hopper, who worked for the United States Navy, and she invented COBOL. We've got Sister Mary Kelly there, who was the first woman to get a PhD in computer science, and she contributed to the founding of BASIC. This is a very, very famous picture here of Margaret Hamilton in a team at NASA who sent mankind to the moon, and that's quite a famous picture because that's the code that she's standing by in stacks, that she wrote with a team of only women. And in the far right is Kathleen Booth, and maybe at MIT, slightly less well known. She created the first assembly language. So if I've mentioned all of the women, what are the men doing? Because they are pioneering, but they're just not pioneering in software, in programming. They're all doing hardware because there's a gender stereotype of build your own kits, soldering, engineering, things like that. So men are pioneering creating robotics and computing, and women are doing they're doing mathematics, they're doing programming. And then this takes you up to about sort of 1970, and then it all changes. And there's been a lot of academic study, a lot of papers on why this happens, but from 1970 you go from about 75% of the entire workforce in programming being women to about 4%. And that happens in the space of about a year. There's various theories, it's very interesting, lots to do with things like the arrival of the home PC, and it becomes it becomes linked with your with stereotypes at home of, well, you give your little boy a computer kit, and the girls have got Barbie dolls, etc. There's sort of there's a bit of gender stereotype there. Moving on from 1970, when I mentioned that we've got the introduction of build your own kits and the home PC, this is where software and hardware become synonymous with each other. And when they become synonymous with each other, competition starts to arise. So from the mid-70s to the 80s, here you've got people like Xerox and you've got people like Apple competing with each other. But from the 80s onwards, when you start to get the founding of Microsoft, things change massively. And this is where it changes to your stack and your computer, and the operating system that is running that computer defines who you are. How skilled are you? Oh, I don't use the Apple II because I find that Windows is much better, or an IBM PC, or I'm an IBM person. We start putting ourselves in pots and silos, which, you know, is natural. That's just the way it happened. So we're leading up to the 1990s. We're now siloed in competition with each other. Everybody, this would be a rubbish talk if it didn't have a Dilbert, right? So I thought, I can't find a Dilbert for this. There's no way I'm going to go out a Dilbert. I mean, look at all this. Please excuse me, that's really annoying me. I'm going to have to get rid of that thing in the bottom right-hand corner. Right. I found a Dilbert. There it is. And this sums up everything. This sums up where we're at. Now, your operating system defines who you are. That brings in tooling. That brings in operating system, tooling, programming language, etc. That covers that. So that's just a background of where we are. So I said that this was a story about me. So here's my story. There are some people that know me here tonight, and shock horror, I'm not actually a programmer at all. I'm a trained actor. And hence why I've put imposter syndrome intensifies. For anyone that doesn't know imposter syndrome, it's that absolutely terrible feeling that you get when you sit down and your boss goes, I need something by the end of the day, and puts you in front of a massive load of spaghetti, and you think, what am I doing here? Can I do this? I'm not quite sure. This is very complicated. These people want me to write the internet, and I don't think I can write the internet. That's your imposter syndrome coming in. So you can imagine my imposter syndrome as coming in from a world of theatre, and I was doubling up theatre with a world of QA and SQL. So it wasn't explicitly software programming, but it was bordering on the edges of tech. I thought, what I want to be is I want to be a web developer. When people are talking about things like Jenkins and AWS and pipelines and things like that, I want to be a web developer. So I have to learn something. I have to learn a programming language. What do I learn? Well, it's not really that much of a surprise that it's this. Although I have the debut of this talk was at a JavaScript group, and there was one boo. Slightly comical, but I didn't know what this comes with. I just thought I'll learn what other people are using, because the more people use it, I'll just use that. I don't know the baggage and the retrospective dislike and vitriol for this programming language. To me, I don't care. It's just a programming language. So I start learning it, and I start learning raw PHP, and then people say, okay, well, actually, you don't want to learn raw PHP, mate. No, what you need is a framework. You need a framework, mate. You can't nobody writes anything raw anymore. Okay, so use this. Okay, right, so what's this? Okay, this is that's Zen Framework 1. That's Zen Framework 1. Okay, right. I download Zen Framework, and I have no idea what's going on at all. And I start sort of vaguely starting to learn it, and I think, okay, right. Well, this is quite complicated, but I can sort of see what this is doing. And then I start applying for jobs. And when that happens, you don't want to learn that, mate. That's rubbish. You need to learn that. This is the new. I have heard a cheer from someone. There'll be no division in the house tonight. You have to learn Symfony, because this is the modern way of doing things. Okay, so I went to do Symfony training, okay, this actually makes a bit more sense. And then I get into being a web developer. I'm like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing now. I can vaguely understand this. Oh no, mate, that's not what you need to learn. You need to learn that. You think this is a talk bringing people together, but it's not, is it? You need to learn Laravel because now Laravel's all doing cool. We're doing things like we're copying the way that Rails does things, and now we're introducing active record back in again. Oh, I've been a web developer for just under a year. This is exhausting, and I just think, am I going to be able to keep up with this? I'm not sure. Here I am. This is me as a web developer. So, because I'm a developer, I have a stock image of some HTML everywhere. As someone actually pointed out that it was HTML and said that this was supposed to be a talk about programming, and I think that they missed the point. So, there's a speech bubble over there, and this is to indicate me joining the industry. I am now a web developer. This is my job. Oh, I think I've made it. Okay, right. And because that was a stock image, this indicates my peers talking, and this is what I hear them say. And because we went for a stock image for there, we'll go for another stock image just because I wanted to put Clippy in. There he is. This is developers talking to each other and talking amongst themselves and me to the industry. And this is what I get in choice quotes that I've selected for you. This is the start of my journey. So here's the first one. JetBrains IDEs make bad developers. I'm definitely going to be saying how great JetBrains is. One, because I use it, and two, because Craig is giving two away tonight afterwards. So, your IDE, this goes without saying, a lot of more experienced developers in the room tonight will know, your IDE doesn't make you a bad developer. You make you a bad developer. If you're a bad developer, your IDE can't stop you. Your IDE can't stop you from writing a fat controller that's 15,000 lines of procedural code, copied and pasted, where you've just changed, you've done like a find and replace. The IDE can't do that. It can do a bit of auto, it can do linting, it can do cool stuff. The place where this was said, 5 or 6 members of staff asked for JetBrains license, paid for, and they were refused because of that comment. So that's developers not being given the tools they want to do their job day to day. Who recognises this? Oh, you're a bad developer. You're not, oh, you're using jQuery. You're a bad developer if you use jQuery. jQuery as a library set up for a reason. It does a very good job of what it does. I was speaking to a colleague about this recently, and they said, well, when I get juniors on board and I want to teach them about DOM manipulation, I do it with jQuery because it's still a very good library for learning. And okay, the problem that it's solved with things like Babel and and ECMA 6 and all that common JS stuff, okay, yeah, okay, the problem's solved. But legacy projects, we've all got them, and it all uses that. Stack Overflow. Who's been on Stack Overflow hoping for a React answer or hoping for a Vue answer, and instead, here's how you do it in jQuery. The reason why that's there is instead of getting annoyed about it, it's because people are still using jQuery, and it's still maintained. This one I don't really have much to say on because I just think this is where we're starting to get quite judgmental. And the reason why I've included this is because things like this are far more common than you think, and there are people in the room tonight that might have said things like this of, I can't believe you're using something old, i.e. Angular, and you're not using React. I went to the Angular user group in Birmingham, and it's still maintained, it's still doing loads of cool stuff. Stop judging them on it. It's still good at what it does, and some people still like it. I don't think it's quite rude, but quite upsetting for the person on the other end of that statement to basically be told you're a rubbish developer because you're using a library that less people are using, and now we've got React. Bad news. Vue is coming up as well, so the endless cycle continues. This one's hilarious. I love this one. Hands up! Who said it? Who said it? I've said it. I said it starting out. WordPress developers aren't developers. there's a stigma attached to it, and I can see where you're coming from, but you've got to remember that to a lot of people they might not be as skilled or as technical, as good at what they do as some of the people that are in this room. Some people, there might be WordPress developers in tonight, for instance, and it's not bad to have a livelihood out of it. It's a good platform at what it does. It's good for CMS. So just blanket this blanket thing where you just say, oh, you're just not a developer. I've got bad news for you. WordPress is a platform and it's written in code. And the people that have that platform who rely as their product on it, that their product is written in WordPress, will pay you, a developer, to write plugins and things like that for them, which you will write in code and deliver to them. Code, money, exchanges hands, you're a developer. I don't agree with it. This one's more hilarious. I love this. This is great. I hope someone at Facebook was in tonight. If you choose to write if you choose PHP to write this microservice that I'm talking about to you on stage, then you don't belong here. And there were about 400 people, and about 10 people laughed. That was at DevOps London, and it was being hosted there. That's why I find it funny. For anyone that doesn't know, that product right there, that is written completely in PHP. I know they microservice stuff out to Python and Golang now, but talk about biting the hand that feeds you a little bit. Seemed a bit ridiculous to me, and that's why Bobby Hill is really, really not happy with his mum. That's a bit kind of comical, so now I'm going to get a little bit more serious. I mean, at the moment, some of these have been fairly jovial things, but they concerned me a bit, and I thought, oh. But then we start getting serious. This was said to me out loud in an office of 65 people because they'd been told that I'd started a meetup. That was the Birmingham PHP meetup. And one of the senior developers there came out with that. I owe my career and my job to the meetup scene. My first meetup was coming to see someone in this room speak about 4 years ago. And some of the people that I'd met off the scene of meetups and then the wider tech community are some of the smartest people I've ever met. I owe my career and my livelihood to meetups. My first job as a web developer was given to me by someone in this room. When you're confronted with that, then I'm starting to think, what's the point? Should I be here? I don't know. Maybe this whole thing is a bit of a waste of time, and maybe I'm trying to cover up the fact that I've got imposter syndrome, or maybe it's not imposter syndrome. I'm just not very good at what I do, and I'm being told that. But the punchline is the person that said that now speaks at meetups. This talk is a waste of time. Let's all be nice to each other. It doesn't work like that. People aren't nice to each other in software development. We like to bitch. We like to argue about tools. Don't use that. That's not good. This is why I disagree with it. This is another comment that I was confronted with when I said, I don't really agree with this. I might have something I could go on stage and say something about this. I think I've got something to talk about because I don't agree with it, and that's what I was confronted with. So, not only are meetups a waste of time, so that part of my career is completely duff. Now, speaking on stage or trying to go to conferences to speak on stage, that's naff as well. You're rubbish. So, what have I walked into? That's what I've walked into. I've been a web developer for about a year and a half, and I think, why did I leave my nice cushy job that I enjoyed? Why did I leave it for this? Walking into a horrendous, toxic environment. But I stuck with it. Or I tried to. Let's see how it's relevant now, even more. Oh, are you ready for the slide? I put 3 PHP frameworks on, but now I'm a proper software developer. Here it is! Hooray! More! This is terrifying. I couldn't keep up before. What's this? You lot are all wizards. I couldn't keep up with some of it. Some of the problems of these things have been solved, but they're still in production because no one's migrated them yet. Okay, so the grunt, right, and that solved the problem of the runner there. But now, but actually, no, because no one uses that anymore. We use Webpack to compile things, they send the modules, and then NPM. No one uses NPM, we're using Yarn here. No. Okay, right. I couldn't cope with back-end frameworks. Now, how am I going to keep up with that? I've already told you I've got imposter syndrome. How am I going to keep up with that? And I'm thinking, well, more to the point, my peers, my other peers who are not computer science graduates, how are they going to keep up with it? How are you doing it? I'm just sitting here and people are barking at me and I'm thinking, how are you expected to learn 45 different tools and transpilers? No one had told me what a transpiler was. And then I think, well, these are people that are self-taught. What about the taught people? What about the computer science grads? What about like PhDs and things like that? Whenever I speak to the grads in the city where I'm at doing tech, they're being taught this. There's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of the stuff that I'd expect. You know, you're being taught Java, being taught object-oriented language, probably some functional with something else in there as well. You've been taught relational database management, how you structure data. Been taught design patterns for how to actually create software. That's fine, that's what I expect from a computer science degree. What they're all saying when they come out of university is, that doesn't prepare you for that. That's the problem. So, but they are keeping up with it, and I'm the one that feels bad. So, you throw in this, you throw in all the toxicity that I've just explained, and I think, okay, now we're about 2 years in, now it's too late. The slightly smug-looking man in the picture is I'm not a developer. I'm in too deep, and I need to get out. But then I find, luckily, I'm not alone. Here's Fabien Potentier. For anyone who doesn't know it, he's the author of Symfony Framework. And he asked on Twitter about introducing makefiles because, you know, we're developers and we love throwing makefiles in. It comes in and out of fashion every 3 years. And he asked about, I think it was for Symfony Flex or something, seeing if Jakob's going to say anything. And so he did a poll of whether he should reintroduce them back into the structure. And that was the response he got. He got, supprime ton putain de projet Fabien et laissez les places à telle et sans la révèle. And I'll let you translate that. So, some of you, obviously, won't speak French. My French is a bit ropey. I can't translate that aloud to you, but I can show you a translation of it. That's the translation of it. So I think that I'm having a hard time being a developer. Okay, well, if you write a massive framework used by, you know, in enterprise capacity, now we're saying, well, you know, before it was me, not me. Now we're saying he's not a developer. Let's have a bit of a face-off. I mean, there's Fabien, and there's can I have a name? Name? Steve. There's Steve. Hi, Steve. Steve is the one that thinks you should pack in all of it because it's old hat. So, how are we going to measure one against the other? Had a thought about this. Right. So, right. First of all, so Steve is a developer. Let's say, and Fabien isn't. So, but here are the stats. The stats are Fabien has 20,700 GitHub stars. That's quite a lot of people using it. And then I had to come up with something for Steve. So I went for, let's explain it. So 7's like an arbitrary number. And I left it quite small, but it's a slightly forlorn sausage with a speech bubble coming out of it. I don't know who I'd trust more. I think it's safe to say that, you know, that I'd trust Fabien probably a bit more. That person hasn't contributed anything. In a similar kind of reign of childishness, now that I've introduced the forlorn sausage, Reddit's programmer humour is a hive of scum and villainy. Reddit's programmer humour, for those that don't know, is where a lot of people seem to go when they're starting out, or even before they're starting out, because some of the comments feel like they might be being made by 13-year-olds. And a lot of very, very old jokes get slung around all over the place. And there's only so many times arrays start at 1 continues to be funny. And it's pretty boring. I'm at a PHP group, you know, most of the jokes are at the expense of JavaScript or PHP. Luckily, some people are in on it, because that's actually about the 3rd or 4th highest rated post on there. And I think there's actually quite a lot of truth to that picture. In a similar kind of vein, Hacker News is a bit similar, but Hacker News is just an aggregator. So Hacker News Onion wants to try and be like, oh, we're the Onion. Okay, you know, we want to try and be funny. This gets boring after a while. I don't want. It's not throwing the tweet out there that's annoying, because you see it and you just think, oh yeah, okay. And it's probably, and then people will back it up with jokes from 2008, and you think, might have moved on from there. It's the responses that you get, and they're the responses that some of us might have given, maybe to other programming languages. Things like, again, it's the hot one. Everyone always chucks in WordPress in there, don't they? You think that's bad? Oh, you should see JavaScript, and then. My favourite one, because it's the most pompous, is Ruby's the cure. If these weren't tired jokes, you know, I don't find that either I have a rubbish sense of humour or I'm a bit bored of these jokes, because I think that where I'm studying in the industry, we have bigger questions to ask than just rehashing old stuff like this. That says Ask Hacker News. What I want to know from Hacker News is probably something a bit more serious, maybe something like, is tech gatekeeping and burnout and imposter syndrome linked to depression? Because amongst some of my peers, it is. That's what I think of you, Hacker News. Boom. Let's carry on. This one's brilliant. This is a new edition. This wasn't originally in my deck. Emma summed up my thoughts on this subject whilst thinking I'm going to get into developer relations and culture. And she said, do you write HTML, you're a developer, JavaScript, you're a developer, Python, let's stop gatekeeping and make this an inclusive and safe place to learn. That is not a bad thing to ask for, because there's a lot of toxicity that we really, really don't need. And you know where the problem with this tweet is, don't you? Some of you will know exactly where it is. It's that. That's your problem. So everything is exactly as you think it's going to be. It forms some sort of massive storm and everyone replies. From the slightly juvenile to, I know calculus, am I a mathematician, to SQL doesn't count. Can we keep the WordPress people out? To which Emma replied, no. HTML is not a programming language. To which Emma replied, did I say it was a programming language? Which was the best response. Because these are people that are missing the point. Let's make it inclusive. But then it starts getting a bit darker. This starts getting a bit darker. Because this isn't now just about elitism and tech shaming. Now, you can't just call yourself a doctor. You can't just call yourself a lawyer. I mean, put in the work. This is all a bit me. The guy that unclogs the toilet is the engineer. It devalues my work. What are these people so afraid of? Or if you're involved, if you feel the same way about the same way that some of these people think, what are you afraid of? A WordPress developer that's being paid some money is not going to ruin your career. That's a ridiculous thing to think. Start being serious. If you write crazy amounts of microservices that are hooked up through Kubernetes, right? Someone that's a SQL developer who just writes tons and tons of SQL into DBA, they're not going to affect your career. Stop thinking that it will be. It's important, whilst I do all this sort of ranting, and it has, you know, it does sound a bit ranty, it's important not to just blanket everything of saying, you can't say that, because that's not how it works. You can't just, you're allowed to criticize things. So, the important thing that I want to establish here is that shaming isn't against the tool that you're using, it's against the person, it's battering that person with your opinion. And that is very, very key because it separates us from being very touchy and, as everyone would like to throw out, snowflakes about everything, to actually, I think you're just sort of, actually you're shaming what I do for a living, and that's not fair. Whereas if you say, I don't like this, I mean, let's look at an example. Here's a great example, Eclipse. If you say, I don't like Eclipse because it's buggy, this is just a token kind of statement. I don't use Eclipse, but a lot of people do. You're allowed to say that, that's fine. Or you're allowed to say, I don't like Eclipse's UI, I don't like how it's laid out. That's fine. Here's a real quote, and it's in Comic Sans, same as all the others. What? And also, come on. That is tool shaming. There's no, that's not productive. That doesn't solve anything apart from offending that person. Similarly, some of you will recognise this. This isn't tool shaming either, and this is not language or gatekeeping. This is someone doing a massive rant about what they don't like about a programming language. That's fine. The reason that I've included this slide years and years and years later after it was written is because people still reference it. Whenever someone says, I need to learn a new programming language, what shall I do it in? And someone says, oh, maybe you should do PHP because lots of things are written in PHP. That's the answer. Read this blog post. Okay, yes, but a lot of these problems have been solved and a lot of them are really weird and pernickety. But it's still just a rant. It's not, I hate you because you use PHP. It's, here is my opinion as a developer, and this is why I don't think that you should use it. That isn't tool shaming. This is where we start to get onto any of the examples that I've listed and all of my personal story about what I've found. This is where I'm going to start telling you about the impact that it has on other people, and this is very important. First of all, your apprentices that you take on, if you're in a company that has the ability to take on apprentices or is, can potentially, if you're in a startup culture, for instance, be your best employees because they level with their experience and knowledge with your domain language the same time as you do, and their salary reflects that, and that's the best value for money you can get. If you introduce all of that toxicity and you start smacking them into shape and saying, don't use that, I don't agree with that, then you'll have a result of one of two things. Number one, I don't agree with this because your opinions are shaping that young person's future, and that isn't fair on them. You should not be hamstringing them. And there's two things that come out of it. One, they'll end up like you. Or two, they'll leave and go somewhere nicer. Either way, you've lost your talent. On the other end of the spectrum, also for more experienced developers that are using older tooling, usually maintaining things like legacy, you push them out. If you say, we're not using jQuery anymore, we're using React, and someone says, okay, can I just maintain like the old libraries in jQuery? No, you can't do that. That means you're old hat and you're rubbish, and that means you can't learn and you're not a developer anymore. You push them out. But what you push out, you might push out 15 years of domain knowledge of all of your products. Probably not a very sensible option. In a similar kind of vein to this is the thing that I find most bizarre about maturing companies, especially not just startups. Limiting your talent by your tooling and your tool set and your opinions on other languages limits your stack and your talent, and that is a ridiculous business model. We only hire senior Laravel developers. What about this junior person that's got some experience in PHP and Symfony? No. Right, okay, so you're going to wait for longer. Doesn't make any sense limiting your stack like this. What happens when your stack should be moving with the times and you're not? And then you've only got a small pool of developers to pull from. Oh, we love talking, don't we? We are gossips. We don't want to agree, especially as this is a social event. People talk. And if you start tool shaming and language shaming and creating a toxic culture in your company, people will start to talk about it. And that isn't a threat, that's a fact, because I've seen it happen. Probably something that you should be a bit alarmed about when you do it. And it stops collaborative thinking. So before I've been speaking about your business and I've been talking about doing it from a small point of view, now let's go for bigger picture, now we're going for open source projects and bigger things like that. So it stops collaborative thinking, because if you look at the ideas borrowed off these projects of Spring and its, its service-based system and version control and things like that, borrowed by Symfony. Symfony's Twig templating language is borrowed off Ginger originally, but now it's updated it, and now Django is borrowed back off Symfony for Ginger 2. This is collaborative thinking. If we all think inside our boxes and our silos, oh, I'm just a Python developer, don't know, not interested in you, you must be crap. It stops this kind of thinking, because these people that contribute across the board like this, these are people that are polyglot people that understand programming as a structure and how you solve problems from a higher perspective. Likewise, in a similar kind of perspective, I threw in sort of the cross-collaboration thinking for Docker and things like Bash for Windows that are happening now, that now we are thinking completely agnostic in terms of platforms. And that is a good thing. From the days of things like old world macOS and old world Windows, ye olde world, old world Windows and things like that, and DOS, it was definitely, you either did that or you did that, and now we are thinking across platforms. If we start doing this tool shaming and elitism and gatekeeping, we're trying to bring the shutters down on this kind of collaborative thinking. I call what I've discovered in my time as a web developer, I call it a weapon, because I've seen it being used as a weapon. So we've already kind of established that it is the undisputed champion of gatekeeping, and this, I feel, is not a good thing. The joy of tech and our industry and what we do is that there is no barrier to entry. You can just start opening an HTML file and start writing loads of JavaScript and see where you get, and then you're on show. You can take that to a potential employer, put stuff on GitHub. We are open for business at the moment, and people can see people's talents and people can see people's potential. That's the joy of it. If you're rubbish at it, you either learn from your mistakes or you're stuck and you exit the industry, because you can't hide. There isn't anywhere to hide. Eventually, whatever employment situation you're in, if you do not know what you're doing at your level at all, people will know. You can't hide it. That's why gatekeeping on this level is not good, because it removes the bottom line. And it molds developers using it as a weapon. It molds developers exactly like you, which means that you don't have to fear people surpassing you. It means I am the boss and I think X, Y, and Z, and now I'm going to shame you because you're talking about something new that I don't understand. You don't understand what you're talking about. I've been in this for 20 years. That's molding them like you because you know best. And again, that's stunting their development. But it means that you have no fear. You don't have to worry about them. They're not going to, these young upstarts are not going to take your position. Why would they? Because you've smacked them into shape. I call it the shaming cycle. Here's you. I've started my own business. I'm a CTO now. I'm really, really, really hot and really good at what I do. And I do all kinds of microservices, and I do loads and loads of Kubernetes, etc., etc. But all of my talent has come from a horrendous toxic background. So now I'm not just me. Now I'm Wario. I'm a nasty person. But being a nasty person doesn't stop you making money, doesn't stop your business expanding. So you do your first hire. There's your first hire. What's the first hire called? Was it Brian? Brian. It's not Brian though, is it? Because Wario's here. That's the given name, Brian, but not Brian, because all of this toxicity is going to come, and now, well, I'm just hearing lots of people's random names here. I'm going to say, it's going to turn into Katie Hopkins. There you go. You've made a Katie Hopkins because of your toxicity and how you think that things go. And of course, you can see where this is going, right? When teams come in and your company expands, here's someone else. Who do we think it's going to be? Just doing loads and loads of really random things. Anyway, right, so, it was Nigel I heard. So Nigel, not a Nigel anymore, because being taught by Katie, you see, so now it's Piers. Now, look at what your company looks like, just because of the toxicity of what you think is right. Ugh, this isn't nice. This is pretty horrible. Oh, no wonder I came into this industry thinking, is everyone like him in tech? Is this what programmers are like? This is probably why I thought of exiting. Except, of course, when it comes to exiting, people do, don't they? If you're in an agency or something like that, we know the cycle. They all just rotate, and they rotate and rotate. And they go because they've gone somewhere else. So they've not gone, have they? They're still out in the wild. You have made people like Katie and people like Piers, and you have released them into the wild, and this is the result of what happens when you do that. This is what the tech industry looks like when loads and loads of vitriolic people come out. You have made a world that looks like this. Come on, we can do better than this. Alex Jones even made it in there. I don't really know much about him apart from he's an InfoWars man, and he's not very nice. This is not what our industry should look like, and this is what I experienced. And why do I think it's important that we don't do this? Because I do feel, obviously, I'm on stage talking about it, so I do feel it's important. And the reason that I feel that it's very important is because our industry is changing massively, not just from our perspective as developers. It incorporates people from different backgrounds and different skill sets. And when I say different skill sets, I mean different industries. We're no longer just junior developers and senior developers. Now, we are SEO experts. We are digital marketers. We are DevOps. We are test ops. Things like in e-commerce is the new high street. The high street is failing. We're bringing commerce into it. Data is the new oil. I said it. This is a valid talk, so data is the new oil. Everyone was going silent when I said that, so I think I'm just going to drop it. It's changing, and because it's changing, it means if we have all of this vitriol in our sector, in programming, we are going to be pushing that toxicity into other areas and other industries that are being absorbed by tech. And that creates probably a very nasty world, and I don't think that we should be doing that. So I think we should do something about it. What can we do? This is kind of an aside to sort of start, but developer relations has become a relatively big thing in recent times. It's quite difficult to explain what developer relations people do, but what I will say is that when DevRel people are trotting around the globe and giving talks, off their own back, naturally, people in DevRel have been, some people, and you don't have to at all, have been writing their own culture talks. We write a technical one about our product, and then off my own back, because I believe in the industry that I'm going to do a culture talk. So we have, as developer relations people that are on stage, possibly a bit of the power to stop that, to start changing things from a cultural perspective. But this is just a bit of an aside and just a start. This is the big one. I can try and change your mind about what I see and try and convince you that something needs to happen, but there's only one group of people that can do anything, and that's you. You make the decisions, and you have the ability, believe it or not. If you've been in the industry and you've been a computer programmer for a week, you have the ability to change our culture, because all of it comes down to this domino effect where small quips have a big impact. And they do. People like sound bites, especially when they're starting out. And if you just hear a snippet of jQuery is bad, that sticks in your mind. You think, okay, right, jQuery is bad. So now I don't like this. We can reverse this by tackling small quips. A psychologist called Daniel Kahneman introduced behavioral psychology. I think it's called behavioral psychology. How we know it in the UK and in America is the nudge unit. And the nudge unit was created, it was called the Behavioural Insights Team in the UK. And it stems from a psychological point of people have lost their way a little bit because there's no starting point for where we start things like culture and decisions. So we give a little nudge that's in a helpful direction. The nudge unit applies culturally to what we do in tech. when you hear someone snap and say something, instead of it burning into their brain and going, Python 2.7 is bad, instead nudge and go, why do you think that? Or do you know the story behind it? Encourage debate, because if we start talking about it, it stops the snappy quotes, which don't make any sense and isolate people. Now a bit more comedy. Because we've got very serious about what I think we should be doing. So, what are they up to? Because I've discussed things about the world of toxicity I've experienced, but what are they doing day to day? Everything is a battle. Everything's a battle, isn't it? So there we go. What do we think? Right, something versus something. Someone shout out.
Laravel simply.
We've already sort of had that. More? Anyone else? Outside of PHP, just more general. Oh, close on the right line. I don't know, close.
Yes, JetBrains and something else.
We've got one. I'll come back to you in a sec. Tabs versus spaces! Hooray! Tabs versus spaces. It's a massive debate. If you've seen Silicon Valley, where they go, oh man, you know that kind of thing on Silicon Valley where they talk about tabs versus spaces? You know that's a real thing, man. The programmers sit there for fucking ages and they're talking about this and this tabs versus... Just use one or the other. Oh, wow. It's not, just don't mix both together. So, at my current company, I reckon we've had 3 hours. 3 hours of debate on that. So,
Surely 8 hours.
at the moment it'll go up and up. So, I did some maths. I thought, go on then, I'll do some maths. Okay, here's the maths. So, the 3 hours, we've got 3 devs at 40k. I said 236 working days, 7 hours a day. So 40k divided by 236, that's £169.49. Times it divided by 7, because the amount of time, hours in a day. So that's £24.21 an hour. Times it by 3 there, because we've got 3 hours of discussion. That's £72.63. Times it by 3 for the devs' time, and that's £217.89. That's what's cost the company on a debate that will never ever be settled and will go on for all time. What a waste of money. Let's get on to yours. Hooray! Emacs versus Vim. Editor wars, as it's talked about on Wikipedia. Let's fight about the thing that allows us to write code endlessly. Oh. To be honest, I think I spent all my energy on the last slide, so, so just give me a sec. Who cares? Pick one. Pick one or the other. Talk about what's good about one or the other. Don't have this endless sort of clashing of titans where if you use Emacs, you're not going to change your mind and go, oh, suddenly I'm going to change it to something else. You're using it because you want to. If you're a Vim user, they call it, the Vim Supreme Overlords. You're not going to change your mind. You can discuss stuff about it, but actually arguing it, of which I have seen in practice, meh. I mean, I've put who cares. I'll show you someone who cares. He cares. Sorry, Linus. If you type in Linus Torvalds into Google, that's about the 3rd picture that turns up on Google Images. He's an elitist and he's a gatekeeper, and I can say that, without thought, because he would admit it. He's like that. He almost agrees that he's a bit of a nightmare. He doesn't care about it. He cares about all this. He loves it. He loves this discussion. He named a source control system Git on purpose because he just wanted to make it sound offensive. Do you know who doesn't care? That's someone who doesn't care. And I need to explain this, obviously. It was a product about 2 years ago, and you uploaded some CSV or something like that. And there was a traffic light system. And in the traffic light system, UA stood for, I don't know, I can't even remember what it was, but it would go green, it would have A on it. So we built the traffic light system, and the quote from the client below is what they said is, sorry to be picky, but the UA doesn't fit in the circle. Can you make the circle bigger? I can't talk about Emacs versus Vim or spaces versus tabs because I don't have the time, because I've got that to deal with. This is my life now as a software developer. I'm being told that UA is not fitting in the circle. I don't know what to do. I don't know how I respond to this person. You can't see it because it's very small. If you let's have a look at close-up, right? There's the circle, right? I think that is in the circle. This is my life. I'm still here and I'm still doing it. Clients, anyone who hasn't seen it, go to Clients from Hell. You get some really, really interesting things. So let's wrap up. What am I concluding about all of this? You've heard lots of stories about toxicity and lots of examples of tool shaming and what I think from the nudge unit that I can do about it. I'm not saying don't debate tools. Do debate tools. It's fine. It's fine to say, I don't like that because of that. But just don't judge the person. I just wanted to put lemon grabbing. Nudge when judgment appears. Let's do this. Let's start trying to make things nicer by not hammering people's careers. And something that regularly gets missed off because it's been happening quite a few times is be mindful. Lots of people, when we start creating all of these flame wars, don't like this. They don't like these arguments. They go into a corner and they feel alienated. And I've seen that happen at conferences. Be careful and see what people like and what they don't like. So I think we should use this as a pillar of change across the industry that has many faults. This is only one. There are quite a few large subjects that we are not tackling, and they're not for today. But at least let's get one thing right. And this is why I'm taking this on the road and trying to speak to as many people as I possibly can, because I think that we should change it. And finally, a burning question that a lot of people have is, if we don't shame it, people will continue to use it forever. And that isn't true. And I call it the capitalism of tech. It's not true, is it? If it's absolutely rubbish, people will stop using it. An attempt to get into a marketplace, a really poor attempt to get into a marketplace. Does anyone know what that is? Cold fusion. Let's reinvent programming in the internet. And iTunes. Never ever inflict U2 on people. Thanks very much. I've been Jim Seconde, and now I look forward to, stroke, and dreading your questions. Anyone? Has everyone just been stunned by my general shouting on stage? I did say I was an actor.
I don't have a question, so I don't need the microphone. I was going to say, I thought that was fantastic, and I'm going to preach that gospel.
Thank you very much.
It just helps on the recording.
Oh, I see.
It's being recorded, so it helps.
Ooh, are we being I didn't know we were being recorded. Okay.
It's recorded every month.
I think it was really energetic, really passionate. I really like that. It does always entertain me that I wonder if there's like a different universe out there where like a programmer is trying to make it into acting, and he's like, I don't know if I want to do method acting or like some other method, you know. And he's like, oh, it's so confusing.
The approach that I've taken is I use the theatre of the performance, but what I hope is, and that's what I've just heard, which almost sort of brings a tear to my eye that at least someone's listening, is it's entertainment to engage you, but this is a serious point. So hopefully the serious point of it sort of comes across. But
no, it definitely does. I mean, what I definitely am not contesting is how real your experience is, because I think it permeates from you know, this is real, and the problem definitely exists, and I'm also not contesting that. But I do wonder, like, it's like all these things that happened to you that were fairly bad things. I'm not sure, like, maybe we can do a show of hands, but that was like, your experience is very different from my experience. Like, I've seen like all of the good sides of this industry and very few of the bad sides. And again, I'm not I think what you're telling us is real, and it did happen to you, and it's horrible. But I do wonder to how many people did it actually happen. You know, that's my.
It's an interesting point actually. the level of there's two separate. I think there's two separations to this, which is what you personally experience and the internet and the online community. And I think we sort of, I think it's a bit presumptuous, but online obviously is just that's the sort of troll factory, and you'll get a lot of that. But has anyone had any experiences where they've experienced levels of this for my intro, of what I've had? Okay, there.
Do you mean in person or on the web?
On web is in person. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's about sort of 50-50.
Yeah, but you also say that you say it is if someone chooses the tools, we never change the tool. It's not fully true. I think it depends how you're speaking with other tool. If I, for example, use Symfony, someone came up with Ravel or someone else, say me, of course, if you say me, you are not pure using Symfony, you are not developer now, of course I will use Symfony because this is I will stand here. But if I say, look, on Laravel you can do it 2 times faster, and I said, maybe I can change. You're debating about your use of frameworking and the advantages and disadvantages of those frameworks. That's fine. In fact, that's natural in the industry. I would definitely say there's nothing wrong with. Yeah, but Laravel allows you to do this like quickly because of this, but Symfony is more enterprise for this. Okay, those are advantages and disadvantages of those platforms. That's fine. What I've experienced is Laravel's a joke, and that means you're a joke. That's definitely different.
Excuse me.
Okay, sorry.
Curate me.
I'm sorry, I might have a very silly question. I just got an idea about tabs versus spaces. I'm using spaces, but I don't know why I'm doing that. Because it takes 4 times longer to type 4 spaces than 1 tab. Then what is the difference? then I'll be used tab for spaces.
I knew it would happen eventually.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Okay,
that's the idea of choose one or the other.
I think we've got one at the back, and then.
Hi there. I'm going to agree with the guy from the other thing that this is always painted as very like everybody does it and everything, but in my experience, again, personal experience maybe, but from quite a few years, it's maybe a few rotten apples, and maybe if you just challenge them or take the banter and reply to them, there's just like, yeah, it's just a joke, move on, everybody's just happy, You don't have to take everything like a personal attack, because people in this industry, they are not mean. Some people are like frustrated because they use tools and they don't work for them, and then they take that frustration out. But it doesn't mean that people are mean or whatever. Again, you just challenge it. I mean, I usually keep saying, I hate Java because I hate Java. I don't like it. I don't say, people who use Java are stupid. I don't say that. I just say, I don't like Java. And people ask me why not, and I tell them why. And it has to be a bit more like, don't assume that people are being mean or whatever. Just, the nudge thing that you say, that's good. That's a good thing. Like, just tell them, like, why are you saying that? Or again, just take it as a joke and joke back and move on.
I still think that would apply. The nudge psychology, behavioural psychology applies to that, because although I'm defining right and wrong and saying you should do this and you shouldn't do this. Is that me? It's also context is obviously very important. So if you're a group of tightly knit developers and someone does a joke that everyone sort of knows that the context is, it's sort of a gripe, but it's not really. It's a bit jokey. That's kind of like that can be appropriate for the context. But if you try and do your joke about Java's rubbish, and I'm standing in front of 300 of you, and I know that the people in the front row, and they'll get the joke that I'm just being jokey, not everyone will, and that's where it falls down. So you have to be careful with the context of how you look at things.
Yeah, I suppose that's a thing, but again, the people maybe in the front row have to be like, not take it personally and say, well, that's the opinion of this person in front of me. It's not what I think. I think that the things I'm programming are good. I think that if I'm being a PHP developer and I keep reading online, oh, PHP sucks, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, but I'm making a website that makes £500,000 every day out of PHP. So why would I care about your opinion, you know? So it doesn't bother me that people say that. It's like, yeah, fine, it's your opinion, you know, you're being
I think in this
whatever.
ecosystem we've had a lot of that. I mean, my favorite joke in the PHP ecosystem is, what do you call a PHP developer? And the answer is employed. So, you know, it's a good response online. Online is a bit of a different kettle of fish because that is it's the Wild West, and I think I think dealing with it online is, I mean, that would probably be in a completely separate talk as well. But people's personal experience, yeah, the context can come into it, and someone else comes at you with it, you can shrug it off.
If it's online, I think it's like, it's a text thing. It's somebody you probably don't know. Why would you care about the opinion of somebody you don't know? If it's somebody that you know, you can probably challenge them offline and tell them like, dude, or do that, don't say these things, right? But if it's somebody you don't know, you don't have to take it personally. Just move on, do your job, think that you are doing something good for yourself, for your community, whatever, and take that yourself. You can't take all these comments that, I read them and I don't like those comments, but again, it's like, I don't want them to define how I feel about my career, because
it's difficult in the context, because most of the comments, apart from obviously things like the tweets, most of the starting comments and a lot of the other ones were aimed directly at me or to someone sitting next to me. So the context behind it is they were using it as a weapon. They were doing that on purpose, so it's like...
This is what I want to do. Your opinion is your opinion, and that's it. And this happens maybe in this industry, but it happens everywhere as well. There's lots of new people everywhere, and you have to learn to fight them or to move past them.
Yeah.
It's something that we need to learn as a person. It's good for your character to learn from it.
Yeah.
Sorry? I have imposter syndrome, and I have been a developer for 20 years. Yeah, it is hard, but it's part of life. Life is easy, right? You have to take that step and say, well, I'm going to do my best. And your best is usually more than people expect, or you do a better job. Like, I keep getting praise for things, and I'm like, really? I just thought that was like really silly. But no, because I've been trying very hard. I've done a good job, and people are very pleased with it. It doesn't matter what people say, oh, it's PHP, I tried to do my best, and that worked, and it made me feel better. During that period, I was feeling a bit like, yeah, but afterwards, looking back, it's like good. And that experience looking back is bringing me forward. Because I've done it before, I can do it. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. It's the time here.
I know.
It's very hard.
When you're in the middle of a situation, it's always hard because you are not moving back by yourself, by other people. But once you're out and you look back, it's like, wow, it was hard, but I did it, and I did it really well. So I feel good about yourself. Just take it back what you've done before, and I can do it again when other people say, move on, keep working, believe in yourself. It's kind of silly stuff that people say, like motivational, but it's true.
I think they're both the answers. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, what you're saying and what you're saying.
No, they're not
So
exclusive, I
on one
just say
hand,
that.
you need to kind of go forward and let it get you. And on the other hand, in your relationship to others, you shouldn't bullshit. So it's they should both work
just
together.
challenge it. That's it. I like to say this, and does it think that saying in this way is a little bit ugly? Say that if you want, and it's a good thing to say. It's just say it, but again, don't let it get to you because it's just undermining yourself. And the same thing to you. You say, oh, I've been for a year a developer, and you're feeling this way. You have to move past all this, and as you said before, this client wants just to say,
Yeah, I mean, we're speaking about sort of a positive experience here, and then we're talking, and then obviously I'm on stage talking about my experiences. The answer is that I overcame that by leaving that job and realising that that was completely abnormal. But then when I realised that other people were telling stories about the same kind of experience they have, trying to instill that confidence to say this is absolutely rubbish, that does, you know, some people do need that boost. That, well, like I said, that's where the imposter syndrome stuff sort of comes in. But that comes onto psychology of getting people to believe in themselves. So you know, I definitely agree with you on that.
Hi. All right, so you've spoken about the tool battles between tools, right? Something I've noticed, I don't know if you've experienced this or you've seen this before, is the battle between those who learned programming on themselves and those who graduated from college, maybe the computer science degree. Now, what I've noticed is when this conversation comes up, it's more like those with the university degrees don't really have the experience, and so they are not good developers, and most times this comes up during job interviews. Wow, and I noticed the people that make these comments tend to not have that university degree experience. So this is more like shaming people for the divide in the community, where you have those who probably didn't learn programming some other way and those who went to college. And so in the work environment, it's a case of you graduated from the university and we don't think you have that experience yet. Well, I learned from Udemy or something, so I'm the trendy developer. Do you see things like that?
I've seen a bit of that, and I've seen various degrees where sometimes like everything, like human beings, sometimes they've got a point, and sometimes they don't have a point. Sometimes I've worked with grads coming out that have just, and this doesn't come down to ability, this comes down to personality, where they walk out and say, I've got a BSc in computer science, therefore they walk in and basically swan around like they own the place. And then I've also seen people that have got 3 or 4 years self-taught, walking around that they own the place because they started off as apprentice. But I think that's humans, and I think that both of you are in the wrong. It's another talk, but be nice to each other. But I have experienced those levels of there's an endless battle between comp science and things like that, and I do think it's relevant. I'm not sure how relevant it is to the battles of language and framework shaming and things like that.
I think it is. Okay, take for example, someone is trying to implement a simple Google search thing, and from school you were taught how to write an interpreter, and so you look at it like, oh, this is actually a problem that you could solve if you write a little parser. While the other person who probably isn't always going about writing a lot of if, them, else, and regex and stuff. So we are trying to solve the same problem. We may eventually get there, but it's a pre-knowledge of what tool you could easily solve the problem quickly with, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like it's getting onto methodology versus. I would say that falling into my sphere of what I'm talking about, if you had to write a parser that did something, if you were doing it just through JavaScript and you're doing it through Node, and you chose that package over that package, and then said, you've chosen the wrong package, and I'm going to judge your skills based on what you've done. That's where it comes in. Whereas the technique that you apply, I mean, both are right. You know, that's almost like solving problems where there's no right answer, and that's probably one of the plague of our industry is that what's the answer though? Well, I don't know. There isn't one. But there's definitely, to answer your question, there is scope in there where it can go over the line, I think.
It's not really a question, more just a thought experiment, really. So, from my experience, a lot of people in our industry are, how would I put it, are, let's say they're on the spectrum, right? A little bit autistic. And actually, I had one friend, we kind of played a game to measure, there's ways to measure, like how much on the spectrum you are, this tests online. And he scored rather highly. It wasn't a surprise to anyone, to be fair, we kind of suspected. But one guy that I worked with was proper, like, he wasn't open about it, but I assumed he was Asperger's or something like that. Well, the problem is that if you know anything about autism, these people usually are very difficult to understand social cues and stuff like that. Well, he said something inappropriate at one point, you know, and somebody in the company complained about him to HR. And it was very clear to me who the bigot is in this situation, is the person who complained. Because everybody knew, even though he wasn't open about it, everybody knew that he's suffering. I shouldn't say suffering, but you know what I mean. He has this.
It's their condition.
He has this condition, and I was so angry with this dude. It's like, what are you doing? How could you do that thing? Now, considering that you're talking about this specific industry, I mean, shouldn't we be tolerant to people like that? Especially, I'm not talking about saying something inappropriate. Not even a small. Well, I consider it a small thing. You know, like tools and stuff like that. Surely a person like that would say more often things like that. How should I?
My experience of if I'd say if you considered the small quips and everything of what I've been speaking about to be small when I was presenting what I considered the end
talking about being
product to be.
tolerant to people that have a particular condition.
Yeah, so that's to be honest, that's an area I haven't properly considered.
But, I mean, is there something? I mean, maybe it's just me, and I like dealt with people like that. You didn't.
No,
you didn't
I
meet
think
people like that?
it is. I feel there's a stereotype that it is quite common to the industry because of the nature of what we do. There's a sort of discussion out in the open in one of our Slack channels about someone who is pretty much undergoing the same situation. These are difficult problems that I definitely don't have the answer to. What I would say is a sort of as a stance for where I stand on that is that I have to back away for that because I'm not in a position to comment or qualify how I deal or present with that. But it's something that I probably need to I'll need to consider. That might come into context though, as we had mentioned context, because if you've got the context, in that case that you've discussed, it got taken out of context, and that's the problem. So it's not. That person isn't going to be. Everyone knows they're not using a position of power in their company to start abusing people in order to influence their things because
the
they're
thing is that
them.
anyone can complain. It's not about power. The person who complained
Exactly,
actually
I'm
was
saying
in a
it's not
different
about that.
department completely. But because I like to be very disagreeable and play the devil's advocate, I don't like Katie Hopkins very much, to be fair. But my girlfriend is a conservative, and she likes Katie quite a lot. Wouldn't that be one of those things that if she would be present here, that you would shame her for her politics because of the slide that you presented there?
Which slide? Sorry?
The slide that included Katie Hopkins, and you implied, let's not be like Katie
Oh yeah,
Hopkins.
no, I chose those people not from their political perspective. I chose them because they are celebrities that. They are people that
irrelevant.
They're people that inflict
her.
opinion and talk a lot and change their opinion. So it's not even, you don't even know how much truth is behind it. I could pick. There's so many sort of I feel that there's sort of some of that's a kind of more of a jovial slide to say these are people that everyone thinks they talk a lot and no one really knows what's behind it.
That could be, but I think that if she was here, she might find that quite. That you would shame her basically because she likes her. It's not even. You're right. It's not even about politics. She actually likes Katie Hopkins. I think that's quite. No, I just appreciate philosophical consistency.
Philosophical discussions are probably definitely for the Christopher Hatton.